The Galactic Empire was a colossus among the stars, its dominion stretching across 1,000 systems, its fleets casting shadows over entire civilizations. It was a society built on conquest, its warriors revered as demigods, their names whispered in awe and fear. These were not mere soldiers. They were the Empire's finest, genetically enhanced, cybernetically augmented, and trained from birth to dominate. Their armor gleamed with the light of 1,000 suns. Their weapons hummed with the promise of annihilation, and their presence alone was enough to make entire planets kneel. To the Empire, strength was the only currency that mattered, and they had amassed a fortune. When the Empire's emissary arrived in the Sol system, humanity held its breath. The emissary was a towering figure, clad in iridescent armor that seemed to shift colors with every movement. Their voice a deep, resonant boom that echoed through the halls of the United Earth Council. The message was simple, delivered with the cold precision of a blade. Send your greatest warrior to face our champion. If you win, you earn our respect. If you lose, you submit to our rule. Refuse, and we will take what we desire by force. The council chamber erupted into chaos. Diplomats shouted over one another, military advisors scrambled to assess the Empire's capabilities, and scientists frantically analyzed the emissary's technology. But amidst the cacophony, one truth became painfully clear. Humanity was outmatched. The Empire's warriors were legends, their feats the stuff of nightmares. What could humanity possibly offer in return? A soldier? A general? A hero? None seemed sufficient. The council's debates grew increasingly desperate, their arguments circling the same grim conclusion. Humanity was doomed. Far from the halls of power, on a dusty colony world at the edge of human space, Sarah Thompson was elbow-deep in the guts of a malfunctioning starship engine. Her coveralls were stained with grease, her hands calloused from years of wrenching bolts and welding seams. She was a mechanic, one of the best in the colony, though few outside her small corner of the galaxy would ever know her name. Sarah didn't mind. She preferred the company of machines to people anyway. Machines made sense. They broke, you fixed them, and they worked again. People, on the other hand, were a mess of contradictions and complications. When the news of the Empire's challenge reached the colony, it was met with a mix of fear and resignation. The colonists gathered around the communal holoscreen, their faces pale as they listened to the council's plea for a champion. Sarah watched from the back, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. She didn't say a word, not even when the others began to speculate about who might answer the call. A decorated soldier? A martial arts master? A genetically enhanced superhuman? The possibilities were endless, and yet none seemed likely to succeed. It wasn't until later that night, as Sarah sat alone in her workshop, that the idea took root. She stared at her wrench, its surface worn smooth from years of use, and something inside her shifted. It wasn't bravery exactly, nor was it recklessness. It was more like a quiet, stubborn refusal to accept the inevitable. The Empire thought they could crush humanity under their boot? Fine, let them try, but they'd have to go through her first. The next morning, Sarah boarded a shuttle bound for Earth. She brought nothing with her but her wrench, her tools, and a determination that burned brighter than any star. When she arrived at the council chambers, the looks of disbelief on the faces of the diplomats were almost comical. "You?" one of them spluttered, his voice tinged with incredulity. "You're our champion?" Sarah met his gaze without flinching. "You got a problem with that?" The council debated her candidacy for hours, their arguments growing increasingly heated. Some called her a fool, others a madwoman. But in the end, they had no choice. No one else had stepped forward. Reluctantly, they agreed to send her. As Sarah prepared for the journey to the Empire's capital, she made a few modifications to her wrench, reinforcing its handle and sharpening its edges. She also cobbled together a suit of armor from scrap metal, its design crude but functional. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. She wasn't going to win this fight with fancy gadgets or high-tech weapons. She was going to win it with ingenuity, determination, and a healthy dose of spite. The day of departure arrived, and Sarah stood on the landing pad, her wrench slung over her shoulder, her armor gleaming in the sunlight. The council members watched her go, their expressions a mix of hope and despair. As the ship's engines roared to life, Sarah allowed herself a small smile. The Empire thought they were invincible. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. The journey to the Empire's capital was long and uneventful, giving Sarah plenty of time to think. She didn't know what awaited her on the other side, but she wasn't afraid. Fear was a luxury she couldn't afford. She had a job to do, and she was going to do it no matter the cost. When the ship finally landed, Sarah stepped out into the Empire's grand arena, her heart pounding in her chest. The crowd was massive, their cheers deafening, their eyes hungry for blood. At the center of the arena stood the Empire's champion, a towering figure clad in gleaming armor, their weapon a monstrous blade that crackled with energy. Sarah tightened her grip on her wrench and took a deep breath. This was it, the moment of truth. The announcer's voice boomed across the arena, introducing the combatants and outlining the rules of the duel. Sarah barely listened. Her focus was entirely on her opponent, her mind racing as she assessed their strengths and weaknesses. She didn't have the Empire's technology or their training, but she had something they didn't: creativity. And she was going to use it to its fullest. As the duel began, the crowd roared with anticipation. The Empire's champion charged, their blades slicing through the air with terrifying speed. Sarah dodged, her movements quick and precise, her wrench flashing as she struck at her opponent's armor. The fight was brutal, each blow landing with bone-jarring force, but Sarah held her own. She was smaller, faster, and far more resourceful than her opponent, and she used every advantage she had. By the time the duel ended, the arena was silent, the crowd stunned into disbelief. Sarah stood victorious, her wrench raised high, her opponent lying defeated at her feet. She had done the impossible. She had beaten the Empire's greatest warrior. As she left the arena, her body bruised and battered but her spirit unbroken, Sarah allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The Empire had underestimated her, and they had paid the price. But this was only the beginning. The real fight was still to come, and Sarah was ready. The arena was a cacophony of noise, a swirling maelstrom of cheers, jeers, and the low hum of energy weapons charging. Sarah stood at the center of it all, her boots planted firmly on the polished metallic floor, her wrench gripped tightly in her hand. The Empire's champion, Kraldar, loomed before her, a mountain of muscle and steel. His armor gleamed under the harsh artificial lights, each plate etched with intricate runes that pulsed faintly with power. His weapon, a massive plasma glaive, crackled with energy, casting an eerie glow across his face. He was a nightmare given form, a living testament to the Empire's might, and he was staring right at her. Sarah met his gaze without flinching. She was no stranger to intimidation, and she wasn't about to let this overgrown tin can rattle her. She adjusted her grip on her wrench, the familiar weight of it grounding her. It wasn't much, but it was hers, and it had gotten her out of more scrapes than she could count. This time would be no different. The announcer's voice boomed across the arena, a deep, resonant baritone that silenced the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen of the Galactic Empire, honored guests, and esteemed spectators, today, we witness a duel of historic proportions. On one side, the pride of the Empire, the undefeated champion, Kraldar. The crowd erupted into cheers, their adoration for the warrior palpable. And on the other side, the representative of humanity, Sarah Thompson. The cheers turned to laughter, a wave of derision that washed over Sarah like a tidal wave. She ignored it, her focus entirely on Kraldar. The announcer continued, outlining the rules of the duel. There were none. No weapons restrictions, no time limits, no mercy. The fight would end only when one combatant was dead or unable to continue. Sarah's stomach churned, but she forced herself to breathe steadily. She had known this was coming. She had prepared for it, and she wasn't about to back down now. Kraldar raised his glaive, the weapon humming with lethal energy. "You are brave, human," he said, his voice a deep rumble that seemed to vibrate through the very air. But bravery will not save you. You face the Empire's finest. You face me. Sarah smirked, though her heart was pounding. Yeah. Big guy, big weapon, big speech. Let's skip the monologue and get to the part where I kick your ass. Kraldhar's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, Sarah thought she saw a flicker of amusement in them. Then he charged. The fight began in a blur of motion. Kraldhar was fast, far faster than someone his size had any right to be. His glaives sliced through the air with terrifying speed, each swing leaving a trail of crackling energy in its wake. Sarah dodged and weaved, her movements quick and precise, but she could feel the heat of the plasma blade as it passed inches from her skin. She struck back with her wrench, aiming for the joints in his armor, but the blows barely seemed to faze him. It was like hitting a brick wall with a toothpick. The crowd roared with every near miss, their excitement growing with each passing second. Sarah could feel their eyes on her, their anticipation almost tangible. They were waiting for her to fall, to crumble under the weight of Kraldhar's onslaught. But she wasn't going to give them the satisfaction. She ducked under another swing of the glaive, rolling to her feet and putting some distance between herself and her opponent. Kraldhar paused, his glaive held at the ready, his expression unreadable behind his helmet. "You are agile," he said, his tone almost conversational. "But agility will not save you. You cannot win." Sarah wiped a trickle of blood from her lip, her eyes never leaving his. "You talk too much," she said and charged. This time she didn't aim for his armor. Instead, she went for his weapon. Her wrench struck the glaive's haft with a resounding clang, the impact jarring her arm but forcing the blade off course. Kraldhar stumbled, caught off guard by the sudden shift in momentum, and Sarah pressed her advantage. She swung again, this time aiming for the weapon's power core. The wrench connected with a satisfying crunch, and the glaive's hum faltered. Kraldhar growled, a sound that seemed to come from deep within his chest, and swung the glaive in a wide arc. Sarah barely managed to duck in time, the blade slicing through the air above her head. She rolled to her feet, her heart pounding, and saw that the glaive's energy field was flickering. She had damaged it, not enough to disable it completely, but enough to weaken it. That was something. The fight continued, each combatant pushing themselves to their limits. Sarah's movements grew slower, her breaths coming in ragged gasps, but she refused to give up. She struck at Kraldhar's armor, aiming for the weak points she had identified, her wrench finding its mark more often than not. Kraldhar, for his part, was relentless, his attacks growing more ferocious with each passing moment. But Sarah could see the frustration in his eyes, the cracks in his composure. He had expected an easy victory. He hadn't expected her. Finally, Sarah saw her opening. Kraldhar overextended on a swing, his glaive leaving him momentarily unbalanced. She didn't hesitate. She darted forward, her wrench swinging in a wide arc, and struck the glaive's power core with all her strength. The weapon exploded in a shower of sparks, the force of the blast sending both combatants flying. Sarah hit the ground hard, the impact knocking the wind out of her. She struggled to her feet, her vision swimming, and saw Kraldhar lying a few feet away, his glaive a smoldering ruin. He was struggling to rise, his movements slow and unsteady. Sarah tightened her grip on her wrench and approached him, her steps deliberate. Kraldhar looked up at her, his helmet cracked, his face visible for the first time. There was no anger in his eyes, no hatred, only respect. "You fight well, human," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You have earned your victory." Sarah nodded, her chest heaving. "Yeah," she said, "I have." The crowd was silent, their disbelief almost tangible. Then slowly the cheers began. They started as a murmur, a ripple of sound that grew into a roar. Sarah stood tall, her wrench held high, and for the first time, she allowed herself to smile. She had done it. She had beaten the Empire's champion. But as she looked out at the crowd, at the sea of faces staring back at her, she knew this was only the beginning. The Empire wouldn't take this defeat lightly. They would come for her, for humanity, with everything they had. And when they did, she would be ready. For now, though, she allowed herself a moment of triumph. She had earned it, and she wasn't about to let anyone take it away from her. The silence that followed Sarah's victory was deafening. The crowd, once a roaring sea of voices, now sat in stunned disbelief, their eyes fixed on the small, grease-streaked woman standing triumphantly over the fallen form of Kralthar. The Empire's champion lay motionless, his glaive shattered, his armor scorched and cracked. Sarah's chest heaved as she struggled to catch her breath. Her wrench still clutched tightly in her hand. She could feel the weight of thousands of eyes on her, their gazes a mixture of awe, fear, and something she couldn't quite place. Respect, perhaps, or maybe just shock. The announcer's voice broke the silence, his tone hesitant, as if he wasn't quite sure how to proceed. The duel is concluded. The victor, Sarah Thompson of Earth. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Sarah had done the impossible. She had defeated the Empire's greatest warrior, a feat no one, human or otherwise, had ever accomplished. The crowd remained silent, their disbelief giving way to a slow, reluctant applause. It was not the thunderous ovation one might expect for such a victory, but it was enough. Sarah didn't care. She had never fought for their approval. She turned away from Kralthar's prone form and began to walk toward the arena's exit, her steps slow but deliberate. Every muscle in her body ached, and she could feel the bruises forming beneath her makeshift armor, but she refused to show weakness. Not here. Not in front of them. As she reached the edge of the arena, a figure stepped into her path, blocking her way. It was the Empire's emissary, the same one who had delivered the challenge to Earth. Their expression was unreadable, but their eyes bore into her with an intensity that made her skin crawl. "You have won," the emissary said, their voice cold and measured. "The Empire honors its agreements. Humanity is free from our rule. For now." Sarah met their gaze, her own eyes hard and unyielding. "Good. Now get out of my way." The emissary hesitated, as if considering whether to say more, but ultimately stepped aside. Sarah walked past them without a second glance, her wrench still in hand. She could feel the weight of their eyes on her back as she left the arena, but she didn't look back. She had done what she came to do. The rest was someone else's problem. The journey back to Earth was a blur. Sarah spent most of it in her quarters, tending to her injuries and trying to process everything that had happened. She had expected to feel a sense of triumph, of vindication, but instead, she felt empty. The fight had taken something out of her, something she couldn't quite put into words. She had faced death and come out on top, but at what cost? She didn't know, and she wasn't sure she wanted to. When the ship finally landed on Earth, Sarah was greeted by a crowd of reporters, politicians, and well-wishers, all clamoring for a piece of her. She ignored them, pushing her way through the throng with a determination that brooked no argument. She didn't want their praise, their questions, their endless demands for her time and attention. She just wanted to go home. But home wasn't the same. The colony where she had spent most of her life was now a place of pilgrimage, its streets filled with people who had come to see the woman who had defied the Galactic Empire. Sarah's workshop, once a quiet sanctuary, was now a shrine, her tools and equipment treated as relics. She tried to reclaim some sense of normalcy, but it was impossible. The world had changed, and so had she. Weeks turned into months, and Sarah found herself increasingly isolated. The people who had once been her friends now treated her with a kind of reverence that made her uncomfortable. They saw her as a hero, a symbol of humanity's resilience, but she didn't feel like a hero. She felt like a mechanic who had gotten in over her head and somehow managed to come out alive. Nothing more, nothing less. One day, as she was working on a particularly stubborn engine, a familiar voice broke the silence. "You've changed." Sarah looked up to see Kralthar standing in the doorway of her workshop. He was out of his armor, dressed in simple, unadorned clothing, but there was no mistaking him. His presence was as imposing as ever, though there was a softness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "What are you doing here?" Sarah asked, her tone wary. "I came to see you," Kralthar replied, stepping inside. "To thank you." Sarah raised an eyebrow. Thank me? For what? Beating you. For showing me the truth, Kraldar said. I was blind, Sarah. I believed in the Empire's lies, in the idea that strength was everything. But you showed me that there is more to strength than power. There is courage, ingenuity, and the will to fight for what you believe in. You humbled me, and for that I am grateful. Sarah didn't know what to say. She had never expected this, never imagined that her victory would have such an impact. She set her wrench down and leaned against the workbench, her arms crossed. So what now? You're just going to wander the galaxy, spreading the gospel of Sarah Thompson. Kraldar chuckled, a deep, rumbling sound that seemed to fill the room. No, I have left the Empire. I no longer wish to serve a system built on conquest and oppression. I am searching for a new purpose, and I thought perhaps you might have some insight. Sarah snorted. Yeah, well, you're out of luck. I'm just a mechanic with a wrench. I don't have any answers. Perhaps not, Kraldar said. But you have something far more valuable. You have the courage to face the unknown, to stand against impossible odds and fight for what you believe in. That is a rare thing, Sarah, and it is something the galaxy desperately needs. Sarah didn't respond. She didn't know how. Kraldar's words echoed in her mind, stirring something deep within her. She had spent so long trying to escape the weight of her victory, to return to the life she had known. But maybe that life was gone. Maybe it was time to embrace something new. As Kraldar turned to leave, Sarah called out to him. Hey! He paused, looking back at her. Yes, if you're serious about finding a new purpose, maybe we can figure it out together. Kraldar smiled, a genuine, heartfelt expression that transformed his face. I would like that. And as Sarah watched him walk away, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges and dangers she couldn't even begin to imagine. But for the first time in a long time, she felt ready to face them. She picked up her wrench, the familiar weight of it grounding her, and got back to work. The galaxy was a big place, and there was still a lot of work to do.